Good evening and welcome to tonight's forums for Georgia House Seat 71, which will be decided in a February 5th special election here in Coweta County. Tonight's forum is hosted by the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce and co-sponsored by the Coweta County Republican Party and the Coweta County Democratic Party. I'm Dean Jackson of the Newnan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce, and I'll serve as tonight's moderator. We give special thanks to the local Democratic Party, represented tonight by Chairman Morris Stewart. We also give thanks to the local Coweta County Republican Party, represented by Chairman Joe Beeman, and the Chamber's Public Policy Committee, represented tonight by Chairman Tony Sinclair. Thank you all for jointly sponsoring tonight's event, for helping organize tonight's forum, and for preparing questions for our candidates. We also thank the City of Newnan for tonight's forum location here in Wadsworth Hall in downtown Newnan, an absolutely beautiful spot to do this in. We also would like to thank Steve Hill, who is providing sound here in Wadsworth Hall for us and has worked with us, and especially Michael Britt and his student videographers from the Central Educational Center, who are working with New Link Digital to televise tonight's forum and also air this in preparation for the February 5th special election. Tonight's forum features 6 candidates who will appear in the February 5th special election for Georgia House Seat 71 to fill the unexpired term of Robert Stokely. All 6 of the candidates who have qualified to run for that seat are here with us tonight in Wadsworth Hall. And I'd like to briefly introduce each one of them. We have Cynthia Bennett running as a Democrat, Tom Crimes running as a Republican, Michael Farbo Jr. running as a Republican, Darrell Marmon running as a Republican, David Stover running as a Republican, and Richard Weiser running as a Republican. Again, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you all as citizens of Coweta County for putting yourself out in public to run for this very important office. This year's special election is being held without primary, so candidates of both parties appear here tonight and will appear on an open ballot. The candidate who secures 50% plus 1 of the vote will fill that unexpired term, which will include this year and the next of the General Assembly sessions. Or if no candidate wins 50%, then the top 2 vote getters will face each other in a runoff scheduled for I believe, March 5th. Our forum tonight is intended to give voters an opportunity to hear the views of these candidates to prepare for this special election. Questions were solicited from the membership of the Chamber of Commerce, Coweta County Republican, and Democratic parties. The Chamber is neutral to the candidates we have here tonight. This forum will remain neutral towards you, our candidates. The questions we ask here tonight are going to be applicable to all candidates equally. We would also like to ask our guests to respect that neutrality. We thank our guests here in Wadsworth Hall for coming out tonight, particularly on this cold, wintry night that could get a lot worse. But we would ask that you hold your applause, refrain from any show of support or opposition during tonight's forums, even for issues that you feel very strongly about. Our format tonight is going to be very similar to other chamber forums we've had in recent years. Each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute opening and then a 2-minute closing statement at the very beginning and very end of our forum. Our candidates will have up to 1 minute to respond to a series of questions in between. After the last candidate gives his or her answer to a question, a 30-second rebuttal will be allowed if necessary. I would caution all of our candidates to follow the time limitations as closely as possible. We'll signal you when you have about 10 seconds remaining, and we'll call time as necessary, but we certainly ask each one of you in that situation to finish your sentence and finish your thought on that. But all that said, we're going to move on with tonight's forum, and we'll move on with opening statements. Introduced you all a few moments ago. We'd all like to know more about you, some of the things that are important to you and some of the things about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to start with candidate Cynthia Bennett.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here on this cold, rainy, and maybe snowy night. I'd like to thank the Chamber and Morris Stewart and Joe Beeman from the 2 county parties and my other candidates for joining me here this evening. My husband Ken and I moved to Georgia shortly after we were married in Florida 27 years ago. I'm a graduate of Florida State University and received my master's from George Washington University in Education and Human Development. Currently, I'm an economics teacher at East Coweta High School. I chose to run in this special election because I believe that there are voters in Coweta County and in Fayette County who want to hear a moderate voice. My platform has 3 areas of concern: our economy, our education system, and Georgia's elder adults. Most importantly, it is my pledge to approach these points in the platform with shared responsibility as my guideline. While economic growth is a district and state priority, this growth must happen without sacrificing stability. Strong legislation with an effective positive impact needs detailed evaluation on a cost-benefit basis. Many times the benefits of a policy seem very clear, and we miss some of the costs that need to be paid later. Georgia must focus educational resources on providing the training necessary for improving our human capital. As our local education systems redesign their curriculum to recover from the negative impacts of No Child Left Behind, attention needs to be paid to growing a labor force with strong work ethic and up-to-date technical skills. Now, according to the 2010 census, this past decade has seen a 75% population growth in citizens between 60 to 65 years of age and a 58% increase in citizens older than 80. So elder adults are certainly a concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Crimes.
Good evening. I'm Tom Crimes, and this is my first political forum, and if I seem a bit nervous, I am. Appreciate it being here tonight. I appreciate everyone coming. It is a miserable night to be out, but this is a very important event. Thank you for the Chamber and the parties putting this on. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, went to school at Georgia Tech, graduated there a year after my wife graduated there, and we moved to Coweta shortly thereafter. She was a school teacher with public schools, and I worked in Atlanta for about 2 years and then started my own business in Coweta in 1997. I've been a commercial general contractor here in the county, creating jobs and learning the systems and being involved with the county. I've been part of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm on the Chamber board now. I've been a volunteer fireman for the Coweta system for 10 plus years until that system or that piece of it was abolished. It was probably one of the funnest parts of my life. I've been a part of the Zoning Appeals Board and learned a great deal of the interaction of the local government. The biggest question that comes up with this from my friends is, why are you doing this? And I am running for this seat because I feel that this is the last opportunity, the last line of defense. I feel that the federal government is no longer representing my conservative views, and Georgia continues to, but if we don't work as a cohesive group based on conservative fiscal responsibility, we will begin to fade like the federal government has. And I just can't sit back and watch and know that I allowed that to happen without trying as hard as I can to prevent it. I appreciate any input from anybody, and I look forward to the questions coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crimes. Mr. Farbo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Farbo. Tell you a little bit about myself. I spent 24 years in the United States Army Special Operations. Afterwards, in 2001, we were attacked on 9/11. I worked for the City of Atlanta at the airport undercover to protect our citizens from terrorism. I am now retired. I have plenty of time to donate my time, to give 100% of my time to what I'm seeking, this office. There are 3 issues that I'm concerned with and passionately concerned about. Number 1 is the security of our schools, our children. We all know what has happened in Connecticut. We see the debate about what we should do about protecting our schools. Well, my proposal is this. It's very simple. To hire people like myself, 20-plus veterans, professional soldiers, to protect our schools. I've heard the argument about hiring more police officers or taking police officers off the streets and putting them in at our schools. Well, my feeling is that police officers are needed on the streets, upholding the law. Second of all, being a federal employee and retire from the United States Army, I receive a pension and I receive benefits. So the only thing that a professional soldier would require is compensation to protect our schools. And I'll get into that later. I'm sure there's going to be questions about that. But that was my #1 priority that somewhat pushed me in to want to run for this office. Secondly, being a conservative and being a Republican, I truly believe in business and bringing business to this county. We need business here so we can have more jobs for our citizens. If I can attract more business with incentives, better infrastructure, everybody think about where we live in the 85 corridor and the airport's 30 minutes away. This is the ideal place for business to be, which means more tax revenue, which brings me to lowering taxes on our people, which is property taxes, which takes me to something I'm very passionate about, our police officers, firefighters, teachers in our schools. If we can bring in more revenue, then I can increase and push to increase pay for police officers, fire teachers, and improve the education system, because we know there's teachers there with limited resources right now. Those are the 3 most important issues to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farbeau. Mr. Marmon.
Thank you, Dean, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Beeman, Mr. Stewart. Thank all of you for coming out tonight. For those who don't know me, my name's Daryl Marmon. I am a small business owner. I have a law firm, Marmon & Leach, that I opened in 1998. I've been a lawyer since 1991. I graduated from the University of Georgia with an accounting degree. I worked as a public accountant for about a year, worked at a tax law firm, passed the CPA exam, and decided to go to law school. I've been a litigator for my entire career, which is getting pretty long now. More importantly than that, I'm married to the love of my life, Lisa Marmon. We married in 1991. Lisa's from Noonan, and I moved down here in 91 when I married her. Our son Alex is 7 and the delight of our lives, and I'm a devoted family man. It's the most important thing to me. Aside from that, I'm a man of faith. I worship at Dogwood Church in Tyrone, Georgia, and have since 1999. It's important to me that we have a conservative voice to champion our values in the state government. And I'm running because we need a conservative leader who will stand up to special interests. We need a conservative leader who you can trust to value our families and to do what's right for them. Quite frankly, I'm tired of the petty bickering that goes on in politics. I'm tired of people who are willing to stand up and make a scene, but aren't willing to do the harder work of making a difference. If you elect me, I promise to do the hard work. I promise to do the intensive study, the intensive effort that it takes to get along with people. As a conservative, I'm a firm believer in the principle that the government that governs least governs best. My top priorities will be improving our economy by cutting taxes, lowering spending, eliminating waste, and passing strong ethics reforms so our government's accountable to the people. Tonight, I humbly ask for your support, your vote, and more importantly, your prayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Mr. Stover.
Thank you again, gentlemen, for having us here tonight. My name is David Stover, and I feel that the American dream lives in our hearts and our souls. We live it day by day. Our future prosperity depends on the government that we choose, not the government that is given to us. Over the past decade, I've worked for lower taxes, limited government, and fiscal responsibility as a private citizen. These efforts have made a difference, and I pledge to continue those efforts as a state representative for House District 71. We can protect our Second Amendment rights, allow law-abiding citizens, with the exception of mentally ill and individuals convicted of violent crimes, to carry their guns without a permit from the government. This is otherwise known as constitutional carry. I'm a proud member of the NRA. I would also like to thank Sheriff Yeager for his forethought in placing the armed personnel in our schools. I feel that this is a positive step forward that he has made on his own without input from the legislature. I applaud his efforts, and I fully support him and the people of the Coweta County Sheriff's Office in their endeavors to protect our children. As a state representative, I will continue those efforts at the state level and make sure that we have armed guards in each one of our school systems. We can implement the best physical policy by reducing the size of government, eliminate wasteful spending, and have a well-planned quality growth in transportation infrastructure that does not include T-Splosh or any additional taxes on the taxpayer. We can push for the best health care policy by the nullification of Obamacare, and push the federal government to allow the purchase of health insurance across state lines. We can create the most business-friendly environment and economy in the United States by eliminating harmful government regulations, by implementing better tort reform, and with the elimination of state income tax, and by implementing the fair tax on the state level. By doing these things, our state will promote job growth through the private sector, not through government. We the people, this is something that I, as your state representative, will never forget. I humbly ask for your vote February 5th. David Stover, Tea Party Republican.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. Mr. Weiser.
Good evening. When I undertook this a mere 9 days ago, I decided to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring. My wife said I would be in the spotlight. I did not know she would mean literally, but here I am. And it's very interesting because when I qualified as the Secretary of State, on the way home, my phone rang. It was a political consultant. Hey, Mr. Weiser, I see you decided to enter the race for State House 71. It was at that time that I realized that running for office was a little different from what I thought it would be, because I'm not politically connected. Okay, I've never run for office before. I stand before you an honest, straightforward, dedicated person ready to serve the constituency in Georgia House District 71. I am a Republican, but I am a moderate Republican. What that means is I believe in being fiscally conservative. I propose to eliminate the state income tax. Okay, we need to raise money other ways by not punishing wage earners and not forcing them into high fees for compliance to figure out how to pay their taxes. But I'm also moderate when it comes to the environment. I'm an environmentalist, I'm a naturalist, I'm a conservationist, and I'm also an historic preservationist. I believe, even though I'm a real estate broker, I believe in controlled development that seeks to preserve our natural, cultural, and historic heritage. So when I seek office, when I ask for your vote, what I can promise you is that I'll always vote for the best interests of my district with respect for the environment and for respect for your tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. And again, thank you to all of our candidates tonight. We're going to go on to our question for the evening. Mr. Crimes is going to be the first up to get our first question of the evening. And that first question is about transportation. Last summer, voters in Coweta County and throughout the counties that make up the Three Rivers Regional Development Commission roundly rejected the regional 1 cent transportation special local option sales tax, or T-Splosh. Given that that's where we are now, and please disagree with this if you do, but also given that we have a number of transportation needs here in Coweta County, many of which I think are unfunded, how would you, as a state representative, propose to meet the transportation needs within Coweta County?
I think the T-Splosh failed because it didn't really address the concerns of the area. Coweta County came across that their list of items was hard to justify the largest tax increase in Georgia history, so that's why that failed. I think we need to work to repeal the penalty that went along with not passing that, because that just further inhibits us to grow and fix the problems at hand. The ways to fund the transportation are going to have to be more creative than they have been in the past. They've primarily relied on the fuel tax, and I think the fuel tax is definitely necessary, but there may be private endeavors that join with public endeavors in order to make roads to certain areas that are more feasible, because transportation costs are greatly growing and will continue to, and we need to figure out more economic ways to do it and spend less. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Farbo.
Yes, sir.
Transportation. First of all, I don't agree with raising taxes on anybody or trying to even collect if it's only 1 cent. We need to find more creative ways to collect more money by what I said earlier, by bringing business here. We can collect more money from businesses, corporations, small companies, more people working, pay more taxes, and find ways to streamline what we do in the government. Here in the county, there's always ways. In my military career, we were taught to always find ways to do things better. Find ways to make things faster, cheaper, and it works the same way in government. I don't see any difference. So I would have to get myself in there, look and see where we're at, and see where we can cut costs so we don't have to ask people to raise taxes on people. Simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mormon.
Thank you. Many of you probably know that the Georgia Department of Transportation has not only an enormous budget, but enormous accounting problems. And it seems to me that the beginning of a talk about transportation is to figure out what do we have. And I submit to you that no one in this room and no one in this state can really intelligently answer that question right now. So I would support, for a starting point, that we find out what we have through a comprehensive audit, working with the DOT, not setting them up as the evil empire, but working with them to find out what do we have. And then, in my mind, transportation is one of the 3 most important things we have to fund. And as that is the case, part of the money for transportation comes from eliminating money on things we don't need. For example, a retractable roof stadium. There's $300 million right there that we can put towards transportation, because transportation is an essential function of the government. Football, as much as I love it, is not. So it is my goal to work within the system to find money and to prioritize transportation at the expense of things that are just not as important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
Well, I'm proud to say that I drove around the state and fought T-Splots. I led the fight here in Coweta County. Part of the reason I did so is because of the accounting errors and issues within the Georgia DOT. Last year, the Georgia DOT found $1 billion that they did not realize they had sitting in their accounts. That's simply a huge problem. If they can't account for the funds that they have, how can we give them more funds? The fuel tax is Georgia's 3rd largest revenue source at this time. Our 3rd largest source of revenue is fuel tax. We have to remember that the roads are being paid for. The money's there. We just have too much waste. I agree that we don't need a retractable roof stadium right now. The true cost on it's actually $500 million to the taxpayer, $200 million in bond money, $300 million coming from the hotel motel tax. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
If I could send one message to the electorate, it would be never vote for a tax. Never willingly give up your money. Challenge your representative. Challenge your representative to use the money that's available to make it happen, to not ask for more. There's plenty of money. It just has to be distributed properly.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Bennett.
Well, congestion crosses party lines. It's very difficult to answer this question last, but the bottom line is this. The money does not just appear. It is tax dollars. If we want to have improved transportation, if we want to rebuild our infrastructure that is old and does not accommodate our large and growing population, if we want to attract businesses here, we cannot promise them great transportation in the future. We have to do it now, and it costs money.
Thank you, ma'am. Rebuttal, Mr. Crimes? Mr. Farbo?
No, sir.
Mr. Marmon?
I would just like to point out that when we start talking about taxes, one of the problems is you have to understand the fuel tax is not earmarked for transportation. That's its stated purpose, but just like the fee that's charged to recycle tires, it doesn't go to what it's stated to go to. So worrying about the fuel tax doesn't solve our transportation problem. Our transportation problem is going to be solved by prioritizing and eliminating waste.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Stover? Mr. Weiser or Ms. Bennett? We'll move on to our next question then. Mr. Farbo, you are going to be the first up on this question. Something that was mentioned a little bit earlier, the state's hospital bed tax. Georgia General Assembly expects a significant debate this year over a proposed renewal of that hospital bed tax. The tax levied on Georgia hospitals provides matching funds for, I believe, about $650 million or so in federal Medicaid funding for the state of Georgia. What is your position on this matter?
Again, when it comes to taxes, we all know that Obamacare is in effect now and will be in effect next year. And we know that everybody sitting out here is going to pay more money for that. So I don't agree with raising the taxes on that whatsoever. I think that we just need to work within the means that we have. And there's really there's no getting away from the Obamacare issue. All right, we're all going to pay more on that. But if I'm elected and I'm in the assembly, I'm going to be fighting not to increase taxes whatsoever on anybody. I believe that there is enough money around in this county, in this state, and everybody sitting here knows that a lot of money is wasted. You see it, you read about it, you know about it. It's time for somebody like myself, an ordinary citizen, to be the voice of the people and say enough is enough.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moorman.
You know, when the bed tax was initially passed, the idea was it was a stopgap measure to deal with the shortfall in Medicaid funding. And depending on who you believe, the Medicaid shortfall this year in Georgia is anywhere from $350 to $700 million. It's a lot of money. Right now, we are in a position where there's not really any serious way to fund that aside from the bed tax. I'm not for the bed tax, but I would support it for a limited period of time, provided that we look at serious Medicaid reform. We can do all sorts of things. For example, in Florida, there was patient-centered Medicare reform that allowed choices of plans that the patients could have. They were happier, and that state saved $100 million. We need forward-thinking ideas like that, not just to pass a tax as a stopgap measure that's intended to be renewed in perpetuity. So I would agree to extend it for a short period of time, but that has to be coupled with serious reform.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
Well, the bed tax does create about a $400 million hole in the state's budget. That is the first problem with what's happening right now. However, I do not agree with raising taxes. I do not agree with continuing taxes. The only way that I would be for the bed tax's continuation is if we have an equal offset in the income tax. If we're going to keep the 1.45% bed tax in place, we need to reduce the income tax on the individuals within the state by at least 0.25% per year for the next 5 years. We have to stop spending money just to spend it. We have to tell the federal government, no, we will not continue with these programs. We are going to put reforms in place and stop spending the cash.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
Problem with the bed tax, it's one of those hidden taxes that everyone doesn't realize they're paying. They don't realize they're paying higher insurance premiums or higher co-pays to cover it, and it's a hidden expense to people across the board. With that being said, there's always a need to provide for the indigent, and temporarily until as a stopgap measure, I think it should be continued for the near future until some other arrangements can be made, until the federal health care system really kicks in to take over it, because we can't turn our backs on people just because they can't afford health care.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
Governor Deal's proposal to continue the state health policy board's plan with the bed tax, a fee, a tax, it doesn't matter what you call it, but it allows us to get $450 million in federal money to help with our Medicaid needs here in the state. The cuts that would result if the bed tax is not supported would be devastating, not just to the youngest of us, but to the most elder of us. This is something that the state absolutely needs, is to continue this assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes?
Well, I agree that we are all taxed about as much as anybody wants or needs or deserves. The bed tax has an upside. It is a means to combine state monies to get federal dollars. It helps to support the poor counties, and the richer or more well-to-do counties such as Piedmont is a donor county, which is tough, but they realize the good that comes from it. However, my concern with the whole program is that it is regulated by an appointed board rather than the legislature, and that concerns me, so I would have to find more information out about it before I would be in complete favor of it. But I think the legislature, if anyone's going to control taxes, it needs to be someone who's accountable to the people and not an appointed board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Mr. Farbo, rebuttal?
Yes, sir. Speaking of Medicare, have you ever noticed that the government, when they find themselves having a problem with money because they mismanage our money, the first thing they want to do is talk about taxes. Let's raise taxes. Let's raise taxes. They don't go back and look at what caused the problem in the first place. We all know that they've been stealing from Medicare. They've been stealing from Medicare for years. And our senior citizens are going to pay for that. I'm going to pay for that because I'm approaching that myself. So I like to look at problems and look back and see what the problem was that's causing us to have to keep asking people for the money that they earned. Everybody has children. Everybody has grandchildren to take care of. Let's do it that way.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marmon, rebuttal?
Just to make a quick point on the idea of putting up state taxes for federal dollars. Somehow in the federal government's world, if there's a bigger budget, that means it makes sense for them to throw in more money. I think that the kind of insanity that comes from Washington needs to be rebelled against in every way we can at the state level, because by doing that, we create our own fiscal responsibility, and we're not dependent on the federal government, and we need to be in that position as much as we possibly can.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
To be clear, the bed tax actually covers Medicaid. That's where the stopgap measure is for, Medicaid, not Medicare. I don't like the current bill that just passed the Senate today as of around 3:30, 4 o'clock. That passed in a 46-9 vote, and what it does is it actually gives the Georgia Department of Community Health the ability to access or assess fees on hospitals. I don't think that an unelected board should be assessing any type of fees, which is really a tax.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser, rebuttal? Ms. Bennett, rebuttal? Mr. Crimes. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to our next question. Mr. Marmon is going to be first up, this on education. Last summer, Georgians approved a constitutional amendment which authorizes the state to approve and fund charter schools without approval by local boards of education. In your opinion, what role should those charter schools or charter schools in general play in our state, and how should they be funded?
Charter schools are a necessary part for some areas of the state, more so than others. We're fortunate to be in a county with good schools, and in an area with good schools. There are counties that are more rural where population and money simply isn't available to provide good schools, and charter schools are a good measure to assist them particularly. I'm a big proponent that parents are in the best position to know what's best for their kids, and for them to have as many options as possible, I think, is a good thing. Now, how do you fund it? I think it's important that charter school funding does not come from public school funding. Public schools are an important backbone of our whole county and our whole state, and we can't afford to draw from there. Funding for charter schools, part of it is going to come realistically from the private companies. Part of it is going to come from prioritizing where we're spending our money now and putting it towards education.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
Well, I personally support the charter school movement. I came out for the Synod Charter School when they went before the Board of Education. I support school choice. I support local control, parental rights, and tax credits for schools as well. And I don't care if you go to private school, if you're a homeschooler, what type of school you go to, I believe that you have the right to your tax money back in your pocket to take your child to the school that you want to take them to. The homeschoolers have a particular issue in that they pay for their own schooling out of pocket. They receive no credit from the state or the county for doing so. They're taking that student out of the school system, allow them to keep at least their property taxes to educate their own children. In my case, I had three children that went through the Coweta County schools. My taxes would not have come close to covering my expenses for charter schools or actually for private schools or for homeschooling based on what I'm paying in taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
As a businessman, two things I believe in are competition and privatization. I think anytime you can increase competition, that you're going to end up with a better end product. Anytime you privatize, there are ways to save money. So as far as the charter schools go, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for education in Georgia.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Bennett.
Important to educating the children of Georgia is empowering the parents to have a role in it. Georgia has now provided parents several avenues. We have special needs vouchers now, we have tax credit scholarships available, and we now have 2 avenues for creating charter schools to meet the needs of local constituencies. The role of charter schools is very significant and is very different. I agree with my colleague, depending on the different locations. My fear with what is happening is the redundancy with the 2 avenues for developing charter schools, but I also want to make sure that parents are empowered to enrich their children's education and that schools that are meeting AYP and are being successful are not challenged into becoming charter schools, because it's an opportunity to marginalize some citizens that may not have an opportunity to attend those charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
Education is vitally important to this state and this county, and charter schools has been a very touchy topic. School choice is very personal, and it is very important, and I think each parent should be able to send their child wherever they think the best place is. Charter schools have been approved. There's some great examples of them in this county. The CEC is a charter school, but it was done in a manner where the businesses got together with the school system and put together a system that is copied all over the country. If it's done right, it can be done well. The fear is we don't want to dilute the public school that's in place. They have enough trouble using their precious dollars to educate the kids, and they need those dollars. We need to make sure that every dollar is accounted for so that they don't need more to continue on with a charter school. But in general, school choice is a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
I think it's pretty simple. Parents should be able to send their children where they want to send them to school. A lot of people don't agree with some of the things that happen in our education system. So they'll go ahead and take it upon themselves to homeschool or send them to private schools. I believe our public schools need a lot of work. Okay, there's a lack of funding for their schools, and I think ways we can make our public schools better is by encouraging more productive teachers and paying productive teachers better. But a lot of parents don't see that in a lot of the public schools, so they choose to go the charter school way. So I just look at it simply as it's up to the parents where they want to send their children to have them educated.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Mormon. Mr. Stover.
Well, the bottom line here is that free markets drive our economy. They drive our business environment, and they should drive our school system as well. Charter schools enable a free market of education versus a free market of business. Our business environment is one of the best in the world because of the free market system. Allow our children to participate in the free market system in education.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser, rebuttal? Ms. Bennett?
Yes, please. The greatness of public schools is the inclusiveness of all children, and this inclusive attitude is the backbone of the United States of America and its growth. I would like to commend our governor today in his State of the State address. He made sure that K-12 education was not subject to the 3% cuts across the board for the budget for 2013 and has added $147 million to compensate for enrollment growth in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Rebuttal, Mr. Crimes, and rebuttal, Mr. Farbo. Okay. We'll move on to our next question, Mr. Stover. I believe you're first up on this one. This is a follow-up to your opening statements. All of you referenced your work and your life experience when you were introducing yourself. Take a minute each and tell us a little bit more specifically about you, and specifically in civic life. What have you done to earn and to prepare for the civic responsibility of working in the Georgia General Assembly? Mr. Stover.
I've been a small business owner since I was 24. I haven't worked for anyone else during that time frame. I've managed numerous people, numerous companies. We had over 20 employees with one of our prior companies. I've been the executive district director of the Fair Tats. I've been the executive coordinator of the Coweta County Tea Party. I'm on the national leadership board for the Tea Party Patriots. I have worked on numerous political campaigns over the last 12 years. I have run and managed those campaigns in addition to just working on them. I have been been a civic-minded individual who works to help the citizens without being paid for it. I believe that it is our duty as citizens to make sure that the taxes stay low so that the free markets can work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser?
For the past 2 years, I was very active. I was a local director for the Noonan-Coweta Board of Realtors. Additionally, I have mentored and trained people in business, in the real estate business. I always do this at no cost. I do this as service to people who are looking for something else to do. But I also do volunteer work. I have a band, and we entertain the elderly at nursing homes and retirement centers, and we do that, and we play on the Noonan Square, try to bring people to downtown Noonan every first and third Thursday of the month. So try to stay active in local things, but also try to promote business.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett?
As a public school educator, I'm very, very familiar with the constituency of Coweta County. I've seen it grow, I've seen it change, I've seen it diversify. Additionally, I've worked with the Department of Family and Children's Services and programs to promote special needs adoption. I've worked as a volunteer to support the scouting programs. I have worked for many, many years promoting scholarships for high school students through the Distinguished Young Women program. And I've worked at the state level with the Department of Education, training teachers to be effective in the classroom for the last 5 years in a very special program. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
To be prepared for this upcoming job, I have owned my own company in Coweta for 20 years. I've been in front of the chamber, the county commissioner on multiple occasions. I've attended many of their meetings. I've even been appointed by the county commission to a board position on the zoning appeals board. I have been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for 15 plus years, and I'm actually on the Chamber of Commerce board. In that meeting, I get a wide variety of what is happening in this area. I'm very, very familiar with everything that goes, many things that go on in this county, and how we interact and how our businesses thrive and what impedes them from doing well. I have been on a homeowners association at Canongate Village, where I've lived for 20 years. I have been a volunteer fireman, as I mentioned earlier, for 10 years for the county. So I've spent lots of time keeping this wonderful place we call home safe. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
Well, I can tell you all, I have no political experience. I have life experience. I've had immense responsibility put on myself, okay, and I handle it well. I've been given a God-given talent to convince people, to talk to people, and to persuade people. That's what I have. I've been married 33 years. I have 3 children that are grown and 4 grandchildren. I live in this county. I live in District 71. I'm concerned because I live here. I'm concerned my kids live here and my grandkids live here. It's just as simple as that. As far as community service goes, my community service comes from when the Army sent me here to train a National Guard unit that was across from the Noonan High School. It was a Special Operations Long-Range Surveillance Unit. I spent 5 years training that unit and sent it off to war 5 times. I was sent to the '96 Olympics to protect the international and our American athletes with a Special Operations team. And also, we were also inside the sewers underneath the venues protecting so forth and so on as far as that goes. And I'm running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marmon.
I've lived in this district for 22 years now. A lot of my time has been spent as a lawyer doing pro bono efforts for people that my partner and I consider were worthy of help but who couldn't otherwise afford it. I've been a Sunday school teacher at Dogwood Church. I'm a baseball coach, Little League. I'm on the board of the Sharpsburg Youth Baseball League, which, by the way, registration is coming up Saturday and the 2 following Saturdays. So it's a great place for your kids to learn ball and a great place to be. My passion and my love is for my family, and I've spent a lot of time with them, and it's my goal to help this community. One way I showed that, while many of my esteemed colleagues here were probably enjoying their summer vacation, I actually ran for this seat against overwhelming odds and when no one would expect you to have a chance. I knocked on over 2,000 doors this summer and talked to people to find out what was important to them. It's important to me that this county, that this district be well represented.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to all of you for sharing that about yourselves. Would anybody care for a rebuttal? Mr. Stover? Mr. Weiser? We'll move on to our next question. And our next question is about the state's economy. Obviously something I think that's on all of your minds and a number of voters' minds. It has been for several years now. Georgia, like all other states, has been greatly affected by the ongoing recession and recovery, such as it is. State unemployment has exceeded, I believe this is correct, the national unemployment rate throughout the entirety of this recession. Even though it has improved here in Georgia, it is still lagging the nation. What more should our state government do to best promote economic prosperity in Georgia? And I believe we're starting with Mr. Weiser.
Historically, it's been proven that the best way to stimulate the economy the fastest is to reduce taxes, is to reduce the burden, to take that money and set it aside and make it more available for businesses to grow, to take the restrictions away from businesses that would be hiring, to ease the cost of compliance, the cost of hiring employees. It's not just the paying of the employee, it's the compliance with all the rules, the regulations, the taxes, the insurances that are required. The best way is to encourage small businesses to hire people by giving them tax incentives. Okay? Make it profitable for them to hire people. Don't penalize businesses for hiring people. Don't say if you have 5 or more employees, you're going to have to meet this next level of restrictions. If you have 10, you're going to have this next level. Make business, give them the availability, give them the right, give them the reason to hire new people.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
We've been talking about this for a long time. Georgia's economy has been slow in recovering, but it is recovering. The budget in 2013 is going to see some 3% cuts, and in 2014, which begins in July, the governor plans to make an additional 4% in cuts. This is a slow recovery, but we are in recovery. I would like to see the state legislature focus on creating good jobs and making them available for Georgians, but we need to do that by offering a workforce that businesses want to hire. And again, that goes back to improving the human capital. Promoting rural recovery is really very, very important. We've spent so much time focusing on urban development that I'm afraid that the majority of our land is rural in Georgia, and we need to change our focus there. And finally, to help small business. Certainly, to help small business grow, we will all benefit from that.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
Well, everyone's aware Georgia was hit hard by the last several years of the economy, but we're a strong state and we have a balanced budget, which has helped us stay in front of most of the other states in the country. I don't believe that government does a good job of creating jobs. I think the government does the best job by staying out of the way. I think if they would reduce regulation, reduce the burden, then people want to create jobs. It's natural instinct to go out, work hard, and make a paycheck and do something you're proud of. And if the government will more or less stay out of the way, make it easier to create jobs, hire more people, then the people follow that, and the businesses grow, and more businesses follow that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
Yes, sir. Again, simply, it's free enterprise. As I said from the beginning, we attract business here. Everybody knows here when you get in jams with money, first thing you do is you cut your cable, you get rid of that, or you get rid of something else. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about government, the state government. If the first place should happen is we should look at our state government, see where we can cut these bloated salaries, spending all this money on things that we don't really need, just like you do. When you can't afford it, you get rid of things so you can afford it. The first thing state wants to do is they want to raise taxes again. Let's look at reforming the government itself, attract free enterprise here, collect more taxes so that the government can work efficiently and give people more jobs. It's that simple.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mormon.
Government doesn't create jobs, but government can create an environment conducive for job growth. The key element of that is two things, well, two key elements. Lower taxes with a broader base, which increases revenue historically, which means the government has more money, but it takes less from each individual. And number two is lower regulation. You know, in Georgia, the government never ceases to find things to regulate. If you want to become a landscape architect, you have to take a national test, a state test, and spend what functionally ends up being close to $1,000 and a whole lot of time just to become a landscape architect. I mean, how much damage can a landscape architect do? If you want to be a manicurist, it takes you over 120 days. There are a lot of states that you can get that in 3 days or 5 days. So Georgia needs to get off the backs of the job creators, lower taxes, and get incentives across the board by having a positive economic environment where any business that wants to come here knows that they're going to have low taxes, but they are going to have highly educated workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
The best way to spur the economy in Georgia is to eliminate the state income tax. We have to eliminate it, go to a consumption tax, set that consumption tax at no more than 7.25%, same as Florida. We have to remember that Texas and Florida and many other states around us, Tennessee, don't have a state income tax. We have to cut burdensome regulations. Georgia's number 2 in regulations now. We need to make it number 1. We need to get out of the way of business, allow them to grow, allow them to hire, and not put erroneous fees on them for doing so.
Thank you, sir. I believe that runs through our candidates. Do you have a rebuttal, Mr. Weiser? Certainly.
And once again, there's a whole department in the Georgia Department of Revenue that's the audit department that audits people people's Georgia state income tax returns. If we eliminate that tax, that's just one cost of government that we can eliminate as well.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mrs. Bennett?
Georgia state income tax is a progressive income tax, which means that the tax rate is less for the low-wage earners than it is for the most wealthy citizens. A consumption tax is regressive. We make an assumption because someone makes 100 times more money than someone else that they buy 100 times more goods and services. They do not. Goods are taxed, and unfortunately, this regressive tax would be a great burden to our working-class citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes, rebuttal. Mr. Farbo, rebuttal. Mr. Marmon, Mr. Stover.
In fact, a consumption tax is not a regressive tax. It will not affect the poor because the poor will not be taxed, or no one will be taxed on their food and the basic needs of life. You don't tax electricity, you don't tax the gas coming into the house, and you don't tax their food. That takes away the regressiveness. Economists will tell you that the worst possible tax system is the progressive tax system, one where the richest pay the most and the poorest pay the least. We take away that tax system, put in a consumption tax, and allow food and necessities of life to not be taxed, while only paying at the cash register on things that we want, such as a car, or such as electronics, clothes, things of that nature.
Thank you, sir. We are moving on to our next question. I believe, Ms. Bennett, we're going to start again with you. In a sense, this is a follow-up question. It's obviously related. It's about the budget this time. We've been talking about the economy. Georgia state revenues have fallen from about $22 billion in 2008 to, I think, just over $18 billion not very long ago. Now up again this year, it appears, to a little over $19 billion. Georgia has a balanced budget amendment, but the decline in revenues has prompted several years of significant budget cuts, and y'all have addressed a number of those tonight. Given all that, what would be your greatest priority in regards to the Georgia state budget as a legislator? Ms. Bennett.
This should come to no surprise to the audience, and I said it before. My greatest priority would be continuing stable funding for education. We have to improve our human capital. If we want to increase revenues, which dropped 5.2%, the 5.2% increase anticipated did not happen, it is because we need to have people employed, we need to have skilled workers that businesses want to hire. So it would be continuing to fund education and improving our human capital. And education at all levels, adult education as well as K-12.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
Yes, I read recently in the Times that the revenues are up, which is a sign of things are improving. I don't truly think we have a tax. We have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. I think that we need to look at what our state spends its money on and spend it wisely. We don't need to continue to consider raising taxes to meet these issues. We need to try to work toward even creating a surplus so that we have money set aside if need be. And then we need to lower the taxes to encourage people to do more and businesses to come to this area. I really think that the money is there. We've just got to allocate it correctly and spend it more wisely.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
Again, it brings us back to free enterprise, businesses. That's why revenue is down. People are not working. The state's not collecting as many taxes. Business owners are not hiring because they're stashing money away, because they're worried about this economy and what's going to happen with this economy. It brings it back to the simple thing of free enterprise. We need more business here and putting people to work and let them keep their money. How many people out here, growing up as I did, got a job from a poor person? I never have. Never. So we have to encourage those people with the money to come and invest in Georgia, open businesses so we can put people to work and collect more money for the state so they can meet that budget. and then look at the government and go ahead and try to fix some of it, because it's definitely broken. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marmon.
I think there are three priorities that the government has, and it's where our money needs to be focused. And I'm going to give them to you in what I consider order of importance, although not necessarily the order of the amount of money involved. First is public safety. If you have anarchy, you can't have a business, you can't pursue your dreams. So I think that the first layer of priority is public safety. It's the primary function of government. The second is education, so that people have the ability and the intelligence and the learning to be able to chase their dreams. And the third is transportation, because you got to be able to get around. And the reality is that when you have across-the-board budget cuts, the way the governor chose to do, what you've said is there are no priorities. Everything's equally prioritized. And I don't think that's the right way to go about it. We need to really focus on what are our government priorities. And then once we have our government priorities in place, let's fund those and then get the money by cutting luxuries, which is not the business or primary function of government.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
In the state of Georgia, we need to reduce wasteful spending. The new Falcon Stadium is a prime example of wasteful spending in the state. We purchased a $13 or $14 million piece of property last year. It was in last year's state budget. We paid for it out of last year's budget. That's $14 million we could have put to something else. Maybe let the taxpayers keep it. Novel concept. They want to spend $500 million of our money on the stadium. I think that's a no-go. I feel that eliminating the state income tax will raise revenues, and that has been proven to do so. And I believe that we do need to invest in public safety, because if we don't have safe streets, then we're all going to be in trouble. The Georgia State Patrol now, during some of the recent reforms in 2009, they have eliminated their pension plan. So these guys are putting their life on the line without a true pension plan anymore. They have a 401k that is very poorly run at this point.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
I think one of the fastest ways is to privatize services. There are a lot of non-essential state services that could be privatized. We could turn a lot of these from expenses, from debits into credits, where a vendor or servicer is actually paying the state for the right to provide these services. It can't happen overnight, and it's got to be, there are some areas where you can, especially the governmental areas, but there are a lot of service sectors that could be transferred over to the private sector as a bonus to the state.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mrs. Bennett, Mr. Crimes, Mr. Farbo. Mr. Mormon, Mr. Stover. We'll move on to our next question then. This one, Mr. Crimes, I believe you're first up on this one. It's on ethics reform. As the Georgia General Assembly opened this week, the state Senate approved a rule applicable to the Senate prohibiting members of that body from accepting gifts worth more than $100 from lobbyists, with some exceptions for travel and events open to all legislators. The House is debating that issue of ethics reform as well. What is your position on that? What is your position on ethics reform?
Well, to begin with, I'm disappointed that Coweta is not being represented in those debates right now. It is a very important issue. If the people that we represent don't feel that we are doing a good job and are being honest, then we've got big problems. I think everything needs to be transparent with the politicians. With what I've learned through this action of running for office, everything is listed, everything is out there to see, and if people feel comfortable that you're doing it for the right reasons, you're not doing it for one individual, I think we will all benefit from that. There needs to be some reform so that the people are comfortable with the politicians that are making the rules that we all have to follow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Farbo.
We all know that a lot of politicians in this country are crooks. I know it, I see it, I read about it. I don't think they should be getting any money except what the taxpayers are paying them to do their job. From lobbyists, and I lived ethics in the United States Army, the highest standards of ethics you can think of. And people speaking for us shouldn't be collecting any money from anybody to do anything except what the people ask them to do and what they get paid to do. As simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mormon.
Unless I'm mistaken, and I may well be, I was reading somewhere that the Senate rules were limiting gifts to $100 a day. And if that's true, then that's no limitation at all. Quite frankly, I don't want you to elect me to go up and eat a bunch of steak dinners. I can skip a few meals. I need to. And I have no desire to go up there and be wined, dined, and persuaded by cash. We live in a state that has a limited amount of time that you serve in session. And during that period of time, you ought to be doing the people's work, not selling out what's best for our families to special interests. I agree with the Speaker of the House that the limit should be 0. I think that's a fair number. And if I go to the House of Representatives, I have no desire to take lobbyist money, and I will certainly vote for the Speaker's proposition in that regard.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
I believe that gifts from lobbyists should be 0. There's no reason why we can't buy our own meals when we're there. I disagree wholeheartedly with the Senate rules that were passed recently. It not only limits $100, but what it does do in addition to that is you cannot bring an ethics complaint against the senator unless you are a staff member, another senator, or someone that works inside the Capitol closely related to the Senate. Additionally, it allows the senators to still receive trips from the lobbyists. So they're still allowed to receive trips that may cost $4,000 or $5,000, or in Speaker Ralston's case, it was $18,000 for the trip to Europe. That is not an acceptable form of government to me. Lobbyist gifts should be 0.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
In my opening remarks, I alluded to the fact that a political consultant called me 5 minutes after I qualified. First question he asked me, do you know how much that job pays? I had no idea. Second question, do you know how much money you can get from lobbyists? Never thought about it. But in his eyes, I wasn't running for office, I was entering a lottery. I'm perfectly fine with 0. I don't owe anybody anything. My vote can't be bought. If there's any kind of ethics reform, campaign financing reform, I'll be for that.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
As a public school educator, I have spent several years being faced with being graded as a failing teacher and a failing school, and I have heard about failing public education system. And yet for the last 3 years, I've heard that Georgia state legislation or legislators receive failing grades on ethics issues. And we need to not be dissuaded by this perceived attempt to control ethics with a $100 cap. It goes much deeper than that. We have ethics issues that are across the entire legislature, including something as very simple as this. We have legislators sitting on committees that have very strong powers involved in their own careers, their own businesses. There is conflict of interest. Several states have laws that forbid this. Our legislators have rules, no law. So we need to first begin with conflict of interest. Don't make laws that affect your own livelihood.
Thank you, ma'am. Rebuttal, Mr. Crimes. Mr. Farbo.
I'd just like to add something. I'm going to give you a quick situation. I was working in a job and I was offered another job, which paid more money. When I went to the interview, the man told me that I had the job. And he came to me and asked me, you really do want this job? And because you can make money at it. And I asked him how you make money. He said, well, there's contractors involved, and contractors will pay you to make sure that they pass. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Mormon, Mr. Stover, Mr. Weiser, Ms. Bennett. We'll move on to our next question. It was one of these questions that I apologize that we have a minute response, because I know probably there's a lot to talk about with this, but it's the Affordable Care Act and how you see that impacting Georgia. I believe we are starting with Mr. Farbo first on this. How should the state of Georgia approach the coming implementation of the Federal Affordable Care Act?
I wish we can turn it away, send it on its merry way, because I disagree with it wholeheartedly. Okay? I know they don't talk about how much it's going to cost everybody and how it's going to save us all money. It's not going to save us any money. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost me money, and in the long run, it's going to cost my children money. I would do everything in my power to try to stop the Affordable Care Act.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marmon.
I applaud Governor Deal for choosing not to set up a statewide exchange. I don't think it was probably a difficult decision for him, because quite simply we can't afford it. The Obamacare package is an example of the federal government trying to force the states to act in the way that they choose without funding it. And it is going to be a debacle, because the system has not been set up to be financially stable to begin with. I'm a firm believer in states' rights, and I don't think that the federal government has any business telling our state how we need to run our health care system. But having said that, our state needs to make sure that we have the very best health care system in the entire country. We need to look at what other states are doing, what's working, and find ways to improve even on that, and not simply take all our time fighting against Obamacare, but to provide a health care system that people are so proud of that they wouldn't even want it if they could get it.
Thank you, sir.
Wouldn't
Mr.
want
Stover.
Obamacare if they could get it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
Quite simply, we need to nullify Obamacare. I do not believe that it needs to be implemented. The state legislature can take steps to nullify it. They can pass it on to the governor, and he can sign off on it. We use our 10th Amendment rights as a state to eliminate Obamacare.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
If I could enact one dream rule, it would be that the person who suggested a bill could not name it. It had to be named by his opponent, because affordable care, if we were to call it the bankrupt the states law, that would be it would be very hard to get that passed. We need health care. There's no doubt about that. We're blessed in our district. We have one of the best health care facilities in the South Metro area, maybe the entire metro area. We understand the need to pay for health care, but there are better ways to do it other than some kind of federal dispensation to the states and direction in how we should handle our health care here in Georgia. If I were elected, my goal would be to take control of our health care back to the state of Georgia.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
Education alone cannot build human capital. We need a healthy labor force. The Affordable Care Act gives states an opportunity to provide for their least fortunate constituents. Today, in the State of the State address, Governor Deal said we do for our constituents what they cannot do for themselves. And the Affordable Care Act gives us an opportunity to do that, to have healthy citizens that have access to fine health care. The Medicaid program has not been expanded at the governor's decision, which leaves 600,000 citizens without access to affordable health care. This is a burden, especially when we're saying we want business to come in and hire Georgians. We need educated, healthy labor force. That's truly building human capital.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
We are blessed here in Coweta County to have state-of-the-art health care, and it's fortunate it's in place. The Obamacare is a precarious, it's a scary nightmare that's coming to hit us. And I listened to the Attorney General earlier this week, and it was comforting to know that the state of Georgia is fighting as many different suits, or filing many different suits against the federal government to slow down or stop or do away with. Every turn, this state is fighting it, and that's why we need good, conservative, realistic representatives there to support this state so that we can continue to be a strong state and not allow the federal government to come in and push us around. It's not their role. It is our state's role to represent ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Rebuttal, Mr. Farbo? Mr. Mormon? Mr. Stover? Mr. Weiser? Mrs. Bennett? All right. We're going to move on to our very last question of the evening before we get on to our closing statements for the night. This one, I believe, Mr. Mormon, you were the first up on this one. And in a sense, you may have already mentioned it, and may be a short answer, but it's about your priorities, or maybe perhaps your number one priority as a legislator. If you could get one thing done in the next session, perhaps this session, of the Georgia General Assembly, what would it be?
I think that the most challenge that we as a county and we as a state face right now is the economy. And I think that it's important for us to look at a tax system that is truly fair for everyone. A tax system that doesn't rely on credits for special interests and credits for this group and that group and treat people disparately. Our goal needs to be to shrink the size of government. If I could do one thing tomorrow, it would be to get the conservatives in our legislature to realize that our government needs to be smaller and we need to look at ways to make it smaller. And one way we can do that is by trying to reintroduce the sunset bill that the governor vetoed last year, which would create a committee to go through government, find out where all the waste is, find out where all the duplication is, and make recommendations to get rid of it. We need to do that. And I think if we do, that all of us will be better off, our economy will be better off, and we will all be happier.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
Well, my one goal would be to eliminate the state income tax. I think I've said that several times tonight. I will continue that theme. If we eliminate the state income tax, we will have a larger tax base than we currently have. The illegal people that live in our state will be paying taxes in addition to the citizens of the state. We broadened our tax base. Anyone committing crimes who are making money illegally would then be paying income tax as well, not through an income tax statement, but rather through the consumption tax.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiser.
My goal would be to make the state leaner and meaner, to cut costs, to privatize, to save money wherever we can, even if it means making the hard choices.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
I mentioned in my opening statement that the population of elder citizens is increasing. Additionally, we also have several citizens that have taken on the burden of elder care. They are bringing their elder parents into their own homes. It's not 30%, it's 62% of our citizens speak about taking care of the elder adults in their lives. I would work very, very hard to make sure that the state legislature provides protection for our elder citizens and their caregivers.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Crimes.
I think the focus needs to be on smaller government. Our government is bloated and wastes money in numerous ways, and we need to find those areas that are wasted and try to recapture every one of those dollars. Every dollar is precious. We need to make them work and do everything possible and not ask any more of the citizens that are paying it. My goal would be to create jobs. The more jobs, the good things that follow the jobs. The economy grows when there's more jobs, there's more businesses, there's more people that are working. I mean, it's all a function of getting people back to work. If you lower the taxes, you can get people back to work, you can encourage business. We've got to figure out how to get the businesses going again, and that is by making the government smaller, less regulation, and getting out of their way. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
Everybody knows I'm concerned about the size of government and bringing tax money in. But the number one priority for me that sickened me was what happened in Connecticut. The first thing I want to see is armed professional soldiers in every school in this country. Our future depends on protecting our children. The evil does exist. We all know that. It's not pretend. It does exist, and it's going to happen again. So that is going to be my first priority, to convince lawmakers to protect their children, which is our future.
Thank you, sir. Would you have a rebuttal, Mr. Mormon? Go ahead.
I would just like to point out, when you talk sort of about, gee, what's the one thing? When you cast your vote, the real question is, who can I trust to actually get something done? Who can work with people in a way that they're going to be willing to pass laws that support our families and our citizens? You won't get there by alienating the leadership. You won't get there by calling people crooks. You won't get there by coming in as a know-it-all. The way you get there is by level-headed discussion and a rational give-and-take process that is politics. And I think that if you focus on that, you'll choose the right person.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover, rebuttal? Mr. Weiser? Mrs. Bennett? Mr. Crimes? Well, with that, we're about to move on to our closing statements. Before we do, I just want to take a moment to thank a few folks one more time. I would certainly like to thank the Noonan-Coweta Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Sinclair, the Coweta County Democratic Party, Mr. Stewart, and the Coweta County Republican Party and Mr. Beeman for all being here tonight for co-sponsoring this debate. I would certainly like to thank New Link and the Central Educational Center and the team from the CEC who've come out to film this tonight. And I certainly would like to thank our audience. We have a great audience, again, for such a horrible evening outside. And you have been an absolutely fantastic audience, very respectful of this, and we thank you for coming out. And most of all, and I'd like to invite the audience here because they've been so good about this, most of all, I'd like to thank our candidates. Thank you for running for office. And thank you for being here tonight and sharing your beliefs with us and why you're running and your candidacy. Thank you very much. I think they deserve a big hand. With that, we're going to go to our closing statements. 2 minutes for each. We're going to reverse the order we started. So, Mr. Weiser, you're up first.
First of all, I would just like to say, after hearing all the candidates, I think any candidate here would serve the district well. But when I'm elected, I'll serve diligently and with a constant eye towards serving the district first. Every vote that I author or take into consideration in the State House will be measured against the needs, the wants of the constituency. The key to representative government is understanding what the district expects of me. My door will always be open, and I will always listen and address your concerns. I intend to earn votes based on merit, not on showmanship. While I do not know how to play the political game, I do know the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. And I would not be standing here in front of you if I did not think I was the best person for this job. I respectfully ask that you consider me for this important position. When I'm elected, I promise that I will serve you with dignity and integrity.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stover.
I believe we've heard one common theme throughout the night from at least 5 of us. I'm the most conservative and I want to cut government the most. Do we all agree? I believe that's what we've all heard tonight. Well, I think I can honestly say that I've been a conservative voice all the time, not just when asking for your vote. I've been fighting for the taxpayers of this county for over a decade. I haven't let up. I'm not going to let up. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm a member of the NRA. I'm the Executive District Director for Georgia for Fair Tax, Executive Coordinator for Coweta Tea Party Patriots. I'm a member of the National Leadership Council for Tea Party Patriots. I'm the precinct captain of my precinct for the Republican Party. I coordinated the anti-T-Splats campaign and conducted speaking tours against T-Splats. I fought and eliminated impact fees in municipalities in Georgia. I worked on Mike Crane's campaign for state senate, Robert Stokely's campaigns for over 10 years. I worked on multiple local and national campaigns over the course of the last 12 years, and I've done it all without compensation. I am endorsed by Senator Mike Crane, Georgia Right to Life, and U.S. Congressman Lynn Westmoreland. Faith, family, and freedom are the hallmarks of American society. As your state representative, I will continue to lower taxes and limit the powers of government. I pledge to uphold the principles of the Founding Fathers and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. If we work together, we can make a difference, and we can protect our constitutional rights. Although I've never been elected to public office, I'm the only candidate for State House District 71 with a proven track record. We the people, I promise you, this is something that I will never forget if elected as your state representative. My name is David Stover. I humbly ask for your vote February 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mormon.
Thank you again to everyone here. Thank you for showing up. It was my privilege to run during the summer and to get the opportunity to knock on doors and talk to over 2,000 people in our district to find out what you thought was important, to find out that really most people are not a whole lot different than me. I'm not a politician. I've been under the Georgia Dome one time, and that was last May when I went to qualify. I'm a family man. I'm a person who cares about our community and our family values. And I'm running because we need a conservative voice who's willing to stand up for our family values, even when it's not popular, even when the leadership doesn't agree, but who can do it in a way that's effective. You know, as an attorney, I have to deal with a lot of strong personalities. And one thing I've learned in over 20 years of being an attorney is it's real easy to make a scene. And it's even easier to make a point. But it's really hard to make a difference. It's easy to look and say, look at all the things that I've been a part of. But the question isn't, what have we all been parts of? The question is, what have we accomplished? What can we accomplish? Because if someone goes up and can't accomplish anything on your behalf, you might as well not have a representative. I guarantee you that I may not be the person who agrees with everyone in the Republican Party all the time. Because up in the state level, when I see a lot of legislation that comes through, quite frankly, I'm hard-pressed to figure out which party passed it. But I can tell you this, that even when I disagree, I can do it without being disagreeable. I can go on offense without being offensive. And I can talk to people in a way that will let them respect me, even though they know that I'm not going to support what I consider to be a bad idea. I humbly ask for your vote, for your prayers, and I promise you that even though this session may only be 40 days, that I will work year-round harder than you could ever reasonably expect any representative to work on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Farbo.
I'm pretty confident everybody knows where I'm coming from and who I am. I'm just an ordinary citizen that has concerns. I have children and grandchildren, like I said before. I'm aware of what's going on. One thing I do possess is common sense. Just like people sitting out in this audience with common sense. You see what I see what you see. So I have what you call endless energy. I'm accused of being hyper sometimes from my wife, but I am. And when I go into something and when I do something, I do it 100% because I'm dedicated to it. So you just make up your own minds by what you heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Crimes.
Again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We've all learned a lot about each of us up here. I'm not a career politician. I am a business owner, and I am doing this to protect my family in this great state. And I think that I can be a good leader. I have great assets to bring to this job. I have great relationships that I've built over the 20 years of running a business in this county. I can rely on those relationships if I run into an opportunity where I need more information, and I can be better educated so I can make a good decision and how it affects the area that I will be representing. I feel I can be a good leader and an effective leader and go up and work with the group that's there to get the best result for our district. I would appreciate your vote on February 5th, and thank you, and look forward to it.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bennett.
As your representative for House District 71, I will not vote for any piece of legislation unless it has been thoroughly analyzed for its economic impact. Quick fixes with delayed harm are bad for all Georgians. My experiences as an educator provide a well-grounded perspective on the changes necessary to promote legislation in improving Georgia's most precious resource, our human capital. I pledge to be proactive in elder adult education to protect our most vulnerable older citizens. Legislation can and should be written to facilitate the Georgia Division on Aging Services 5-year strategic plan, which focuses on elder adults and their caregivers. I will take strong communication skills, my integrity, my ability to think clearly, and my listening skills to Atlanta. And I promise I will leave one thing at home every single day, and that is my personal agenda. Cynthia Bennett, February 5th.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, to our candidates, we thank you for coming tonight. We thank you for running in this important special election on February 5th, and we wish you all good luck. To the voters of Coweta County, we hope you turn out to vote on February 5th. Again, to the Chamber, to the Republican Party, and to the Democratic Party of Coweta County, we appreciate their sponsorship of this forum tonight. And to our audience, thank you for joining us here at Wadsworth Hall. Good night.